And now our classic serial, the second and final part of the Iliad, adapted for BBC Radio 4 by Tom Holland.
The Iliad by Homer, Episode 2. For 9 years, the Greek armies, the Achaeans, have been besieging the city of Troy. Agamemnon, the Achaean war leader, has insulted Achilles, his greatest warrior. Achilles prays to Zeus to make Agamemnon suffer, and Zeus, king of the gods, grants his prayer. Hector, son of the king of Troy, leads the Trojans in a bloody offensive which sweeps the Achaeans back towards their burning ships. Christopher Eccleston plays Achilles, Ian Glenn plays Hector, and Derek Jacobi is the voice of Homer.
The brilliant runner Achilles watched and marked it all. There he stood, on the stern of his looming hollow hull, looking out over the heartsick rout of war, while his friend in arms, Patroclus, wept warm tears.
Like a girl, a baby running after her mother, begging to be picked up, and she tugs her skirts, fawning up at her, till she takes her in her arms. That's how you look, Patroclus, streaming live tears.
Achilles, son of Peleus, greatest of the Achaeans, spare me your anger, please. Such heavy blows have overwhelmed the troops. Our former champions all laid up in the ships, all are hit by arrows or run through by spears. Odysseus wounded, and Agamemnon too, the famous spearman.
Agamemnon, that son of Atreus, treating me like some vagabond, tearing that girl, my prize, right from my grasp.
You're intractable, Achilles. Pray God such anger never seizes me. Such rage you nurse. Please defend the Achaeans from disaster.
The whole city of Troy comes trampling down on us, daring, wild. Why? They cannot see the brow of my helmet flash before their eyes. Oh, they'd soon run for their lives and choke the torrent beds of the field with all their corpses, if only the mighty Agamemnon met me with respect.
We are fresh, unbroken. The enemy's battle-weary. We could roll those broken Trojans back to Troy, clear of the ships and shelters.
Enough! I said I would not relax my anger, not till the cries and carnage reach my own ships.
Then let the Myrmidon army follow my command. I might bring some light of victory to our Achaeans.
Yes, you. You strap my splendid army on your back. Yes, Patroclus. Fight disaster off the ships. Fling yourselves at the Trojans full force, but take this command to heart. Obey it to the end. Once you have whipped the enemy from the fleet, you must come back, Patroclus. You must not, lost in the flush and fire of triumph, slaughtering Trojans outright, drive your troops to Troy. So to arms, Patroclus, prince and master horseman.
Patroclus armed himself in Achilles' gleaming bronze. Next, ordered Automedon to yoke the war team, a man he honoured next to Achilles, breaker of men. So, at his command, Automedon yoked the horses, and Prince Achilles, ranging his ranks of Myrmidons, arrayed them along the shelters, all in armour, swarming round Achilles' dauntless friend in arms.
Oh, would to God, Patroclus, dearest friend, not one of all these Trojans could flee his death, not one. No Achaean either. But we could stride from the slaughter, so we could bring Troy's hallowed crown of towers toppling down around us, you and I alone.
And then, taking a stand before his lodge, he prayed, pouring the wine to earth and scanning the skies.
King Zeus, I beg you, bring my prayer to pass. I send my comrade forth to war, fill his heart with courage. But once he repels the roaring onslaught from the ships, let him come back to me and our vast fleet unharmed.
One prayer Zeus in his wisdom granted, the other he denied. Patroclus would drive the onslaught off the ships. That much Zeus granted, true, but denied him safe and sound return from battle. Once Achilles had poured the wine and prayed to Zeus, he took his stand outside, his spirit yearning still to watch Achaeans and Trojans struggle to death. Myrmidons, battalions ranged in armour with great-hearted Patroclus, moving out now, the fury bursting inside them, suddenly charged the Trojans. They swarmed forth like wasps from a roadside nest when boys have made it their sport to set them seething. Myrmidons pouring out of the ships, ceaseless shouts rising, ships around them echoing back their shattering cries. The Trojans, soon as they saw Patroclus in brazen gear, all their courage quaked, their columns buckled. Thinking swift Achilles had tossed to the winds his hard rage that had held him back by the ships, Patroclus whipped the terror in all their hearts, and the Trojans scattered back with high, shrill cries. The Achaeans poured against them, back by the hollow hulls, drove the ravening fire clear of the warships. Then Hector knew full well that the tide of battle had turned, but still stood firm, defending die-hard comrades, until, at last, his speeding horses swept him away, armour and all, leaving his men to face their fate. Trojans trapped, but struggling on in the deep trench. Hundreds of plunging war teams dragging chariots down, snapping the yoke poles, ditched their masters' cars, and Patroclus charged them, heart of fire for the kill, and straight across the trench went his own careering team at a superhuman bound. Magnificent racing stallions, gifts of the gods to Peleus, shining, immortal gifts, straining breakneck on, as Patroclus' high courage urged him against Prince Hector, keen for the kill. But Hector's veering horses swept him clear. Still Patroclus kept on, sweeping in, hacking Trojans down, making them pay the price for Achaeans slaughtered, blind in his fatal frenzy, luckless soldier. If only he had obeyed Achilles' strict command, he might have escaped his doom, the stark night of death. But the will of Zeus will always overpower the will of men. Zeus, who strikes fear in even the bravest man of war. And at other times he will spur a man to battle, just as he urged Patroclus' fury now. And then and there, the Achaeans might have taken Troy, her towering gates toppling under Patroclus' power, heading the vanguard, storming on with his spear. But Apollo took his stand on the massive rampart, and at Patroclus' assault, like something superhuman, the god shrieked down his winging words of terror.
Back! Patroclus, prince, go back! It is not the will of fate that the proud Trojan citadel fall before your spear! Not even before Achilles, far greater man than you!
And Patroclus gave ground, backing a good way off, cleared of the deadly archer's wrath. But now Hector, reining his high-strung team at the Scaean gates, debated a moment, waiting. Then, ignoring the Achaean masses, killing none, he lashed his pounding stallions straight at Patroclus, came rushing into him right across the lines, and rammed his spear shaft home, stabbing deep in the bowels, and the brazen point went jutting straight out through Patroclus' back. Down he crashed. Horror gripped the Achaean armies, but Hector gloried over him, wild, winging words.
Patroclus, surely you must have thought you'd storm my city down, you'd wrest from the wives of Troy their day of freedom, drag them off in ships to your own dear fatherland. You fool! The vultures will eat your body raw. Not for all his power could Achilles save you now.
Hector, now is your time to glory to the skies. But already I see them looming up beside you. Death, and the strong force of fate to bring you down, at the hands of Peleus' great royal son, Achilles.
Death cut him short. The end closed in around him. Flying free of his limbs, his soul went winging down to the house of death, wailing his fate, leaving his manhood far behind, his young and supple strength. But glorious Hector planted a heel against Patroclus' chest, wrenched his bronze spear from the wound, kicked him over, flat on his back, free and cleared of the weapon. The sight roused the fury in battling Ajax' heart. Hector, tearing the famous armor off Patroclus, tugging hard at the corpse, mad to hack the head from the neck with his sword and drag the trunk away to glut the dogs of Troy. But in charged Ajax, shield like a tower before him, ploughed through the front to stand astride the body, stood fast now, like a lion cornered round his young when hunters cross him, leading his cubs through the woods. And Hector, falling back on a crowd of comrades, leapt to his chariot, flinging the burnished gear to his waiting troops to haul away to Troy, trophies to his glory.
I'll strap on the brave Achilles' armor, burnished armor I stripped from the strong Patroclus when I killed him.
Hector exchanged his armor, removing his own gear, and donning the deathless arms of Peleus' son Achilles. But when Zeus, who arrays the clouds, saw Hector from afar, strapping on the gear of Peleus' godlike son, he shook his head and addressed his own deep heart.
Poor soldier. Never a thought of death weighs down your spirit now. Yet death is right beside you. You don the deathless arms of a great fighter, and all other fighters tremble before him, true. But you killed his comrade, gentle, strong, and against all rights you ripped the immortal armor off his head and shoulders. So, great power for the moment I will grant you, to compensate for all that is to come. Never again will you return from battle, Hector.
So he decreed, and the King of Heaven bowed his craggy, dark brows. Zeus fitted the armor tightly on Hector's body, filling his limbs with power and fighting strength. And on he strode amidst his illustrious Trojan allies, calling out with wild cries, now flashing before them all in the gleaming battle gear of great-hearted Achilles.
That man who drags Patroclus back to Trojan charioteers, dead as Patroclus is, and makes great Ajax yield. To him I will give 1/2 of the bloody spoils, keep half for myself. His glory will equal mine.
Strong vow, and the Trojans bore straight down on the Achaeans, full force, shaking their spears, their hearts fired with hopes of dragging Patroclus' body out from under Ajax, roaring in. But the Achaeans faced them, standing fast in a ring round Patroclus, one fury seizing their hearts, packing a wall of bronze shields. So all day long, for the men of war, the fighting raged, grim and grueling, relentless, drenching labor, non-stop, over the great runner Achilles' steadfast aid in arms, an enormous tug of war, both sides dragging the corpse. But standing clear of the fray, Achilles' horses wept from the time they first had sensed their driver's death, though Automedon lashed them with stinging whip, coaxing them gently now shouting oath on oath, but staunch as a pillar planted tall above a barrow, standing sentry over some lord or lady's gravesite, so they stood, holding the blazing chariot stock still, longing now for their driver, their luxurious manes soiled. And Zeus pitied them, watching their tears flow.
Poor creatures. Why did we give you to a mortal doomed to death? You immortal beasts who never age or die. So you could suffer the pains of wretched men. There is nothing alive more agonized than man, of all that breathe and crawl across the earth.
And so saying, he breathed fresh fire in the team. They shook the dust from their manes and galloped off, speeding the fast chariot just where the armies clashed. Swift Automedon racing toward Achilles, streaming warm tears to give the dreaded message.
Patroclus has fallen. They're fighting over his corpse. He's stripped, naked. Hector, with that flashing helmet. Hector has your arms.
A black cloud of grief came shrouding over Achilles, both hands clawing the ground for soot and filth. He poured it over his head, fouled his handsome face, and black ashes settled onto his fresh, clean war shirt. Overpowered in all his power, sprawled in the dust, Achilles lay there, fallen, tearing his hair, defiling it with his own hands. And the women he and Patroclus carried off as captives caught the grief in their hearts, and keened and wailed. Out of the tents they ran to wing the great Achilles, sank to the ground, each woman's knees gave way. Automedon, kneeling near, weeping uncontrollably, clutched Achilles' hands as he wept his proud heart out, for fear he would slash his throat with an iron blade. Achilles suddenly loosed a terrible, wrenching cry, and his noble mother heard him, seated near her father, the old man of the sea, in the salt green depths, and she cried out in turn. She left her cave. The ground swell heaved open. She rose before her son.
My child, what sorrow has touched your heart? Zeus has accomplished everything you wanted, just as you raised your hands and prayed that day. All the sons of Achaea are pinned against the ships, and all for want of you. They suffer shattering losses.
Oh, dear mother, true. All those burning desires, but what joy to me now! My dear comrades dead. Enough. Now I'll go and meet that murderer head-on. That Hector, who destroyed the dearest life I know.
You're doomed to a short life, my son, from all you say. For hard on the heels of Hector's death, your death must come at once.
Then let me die at once, since I could not save my dearest comrade from his death. A world away from his fatherland he perished, lacking me, my fighting strength to defend him. Don't try to hold me back from the fighting, mother. Love me as you do.
Yes, my son, you're right. But Hector glories in your armor, strapped across his back. Wait. Don't fling yourself in the grind of battle yet. Tomorrow I will return to you with the rising sun, bearing splendid arms from Hephaestus, god of fire.
With that vow, glistening-footed Thetis soared towards Olympus to win her dear son an immortal set of arms. And Achilles, Zeus's favourite fighter, rose up too, and crowning his head Athena swept a golden cloud, and from it she lit a fire to blaze across the field. He strode from the rampart, took his stand at the trench, loosed an enormous cry, and off in the distance Athena shrieked out too, and drove unearthly panic through the Trojans. All their spirits quaked, even sleek-maned horses, sensing death in the wind, slewed their chariots round, and charioteers were struck dumb when they saw that fire, relentless, terrible, burst from proud-hearted Achilles' head, blazing, as fiery-hearted Athena fueled the flames. 3 times, the brilliant Achilles gave his great war cry over the trench. 3 times, the Trojans and their allies whirled in panic. And now, the exultant Achaeans seized the chance to drag Patroclus' body quickly out of range and laid him on a litter. Standing round him, loving comrades mourned, and the swift runner Achilles joined them, grieving, weeping warm tears when he saw his steadfast comrade lying dead on the bier, mauled by tearing bronze. The man he sent to war with team and chariot, but never welcomed home again alive. Now the sun went down at last, and brave Achaeans ceased the grueling clash of arms, the levelling rout of war, and the Trojans, in turn, far across the field, freed their racing teams from under chariot yokes. Meeting on their feet in council, it was Paris led the debate.
Racing Achilles makes my blood run cold. So wild the man's fury, he will never rest content. Holding out on the plain where Trojans and Achaeans met halfway, exchanging blows in the savage onset. Never! He will fight for our wives, for Troy itself. So, retreat to Troy. Trust me. We will face disaster.
But, helmet flashing, Hector wheeled with a dark glance.
You say go back again, be crammed inside the city. Aren't you sick of being caged inside those walls? You, why are you so afraid of war and slaughter? Even if all the rest of us drop and die around you, you lack the heart to last it out in combat. Coward. If it really was Achilles who reared beside the ships, all the worse for him. If he wants his fill of war, I, for one, I'll never run from his grim assault. I'll stand up to the man.
The Trojans roared assent, lost in folly. Athena had swept away their senses. They gave applause to Hector's ruinous tactics, none to Paris, who gave them sound advice. And now their entire army settled down to supper. But all night long the Achaeans raised Patroclus' dirge. And Achilles led them now in a throbbing chant of sorrow, laying his man-killing hands on his great friend's chest, covering him head to foot in a thin, light sheet, and over his body spreading the white linen shroud. Meanwhile, down flashed Thetis, like a hawk from snowy Mount Olympus, as dawn rose up in a golden robe from ocean's tides, bringing light to immortal gods and mortal men. Thetis spared Hephaestus' gift to the ships, a grand array of armor, a gorgeous, immortal work, burnished, brighter, finer than any mortal had ever before borne across his back. She found her beloved son lying face down, embracing Patroclus' body, sobbing, wailing, and round him crowded troops of mourning comrades, and the glistening goddess moved among them now.
My child, leave your friend to lie there dead. Here, Achilles, accept this glorious armor. Look, a gift from the god of fire, burnished bright, finer than any mortal has ever borne across his back.
The goddess laid the armor down at Achilles' feet, and the gear clashed out in all its blazoned glory. A tremor ran through the Myrmidon ranks. None dared to look straight at the glare. Each fighter shrank away. Not Achilles. The more he gazed, the deeper his anger went. His eyes flashing under his eyelids, fierce as fire, exulting, holding the gods' shining gifts in his hands. Then brilliant Achilles strode along the surf, crying his piercing cry, and roused Achaean warriors, even those who'd kept to the beached ships till now. The helmsmen, who handled the heavy steering oars, even they trooped to the muster. Great Achilles, who held back from the brutal fighting so long, had just come blazing forth. And the lord of men, Agamemnon, came in last of all.
Agamemnon, was it better for both of us after all? For you and me to rage at each other, raked by anguish, consumed by heart-sick strife, all for a young girl? Now, by God, I call a halt to my anger. Quickly, drive our long-haired Achaeans to battle now!
His voice so firm that Achilles caused the other kings to scatter. The glory of armor lit the skies, and the whole earth laughed, rippling under the glitter of bronze, thunder resounding under trampling feet of armies. And in their midst, the brilliant Achilles began to arm for battle. First, he wrapped his legs with well-made greaves, fastened behind his heels with silver ankle clasps. Next, he strapped the breastplate round his chest. Then over his shoulder, Achilles slung his sword, the fine bronze blade with its silver-studded hilt. Then hoisted the massive shield, flashing far and wide like a full round moon, and gleaming bright as the light that reaches sailors out at sea, the flare of a watchfire burning strong in a lonely sheepfold up some mountain slope, when the gale winds hurl the crew that fights against them far over the fish-swarming sea, far from loved ones. So the gleam from Achilles' well-wrought blazoned shield shot up and hit the skies. Then, lifting his rugged helmet, he set it down on his brows, and the horsehair crest shone like a star, and the waving golden plumes shook that Hephaestus had placed, bristling thick along its ridge. And then, last, Achilles drew his father's spear from its socket stand, weighty, heavy, tough. No other Achaean fighter could heft that shaft. Only Achilles had the skill to wield it well. And roan Beauty, the horse with flashing hoofs, spoke up from under the yoke, bowing his head low. The white-armed goddess Hera gave him voice.
We will save your life, master, mighty Achilles. But the day of death already hovers near, and we are not to blame.
Don't waste your breath. I know I am destined to die here. Far from my dear father, far from my mother, but all the same, I will never stop till I drive the Trojans to their bloody fill of war.
So out in the front ranks he drove his plunging stallions, and by the beaked ships the Achaeans formed for battle. Arming round you, Achilles, starved for war, and faced by the Trojan ranks along the plain's high ground. Down from the high skies, the father of men and gods shook the boundless earth and towering heads of mountains. The whole world quaked. The walls of Troy and all Achaea's ships. And terror-struck in the underworld, Hades, lord of the dead, cringed and sprang from his throne and screamed shrill, fearing the earth would burst wide open and lay bare to mortal men and immortal gods at last the houses of the dead, the dank, mouldering horrors that fill the deathless gods themselves with loathing. Like inhuman fire ranging on through the mountain gorges, splinter dry, setting ablaze big stands of timber, the wind swirling the huge fireball left and right, chaos of fire, Achilles stormed on with brandished spear, like a frenzied god of battle, trampling all he killed, and the earth ran black with blood. Thundering on, the great Achilles rampaged, his sharp-hoofed stallions trampling shields and corpses. Axle under his chariot splashed with blood, blood on the handrails sweeping round the car, sprays of blood shooting up from the stallion's hoofs and churning, whirling wheels. the son of Peleus, charioteering on to seize his glory, bloody filth splattering both strong arms, Achilles' invincible arms.
Die, Trojans! Die! Till I butcher all the way to sacred Troy. Run, headlong on, I'll hack you from behind. Nothing can save you. Die! Writhing in death till all you Trojans pay for Patroclus' blood.
As smoke goes towering into the broad, vaulting sky from a burning city, and the god's wrath drives it on, dealing struggle to all, to many searing grief, so Achilles dealt to the Trojans struggle.